Can you believe it? On my own wedding day, right in front of hundreds of guests, my father-in-law stood up and declared, "Money will vanish, but dirt will feed you forever." The whole hall burst into laughter, but for me, it felt like a knife cutting into my chest. They saw me as nothing more than a poor farm girl. And in that very moment, I knew this marriage would never be simple. My wedding day unfolded under a golden sunset, the kind of light that makes even the old wooden fences on our farm glow with warmth. Long tables draped in white cloth stretched across the yard, guests laughing, glasses of wine catching the last rays of the evening. I told myself this was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, the day Marcus and I officially promised each other forever. But I didn't know that in the middle of all this joy, the very first cut to my pride would be made. Richard, my father-in-law, rose to his feet, glass in hand. He carried himself with the kind of authority that demanded attention, his voice sharp and commanding. Everyone fell silent, expecting words of blessing. Instead, he declared, "Money can vanish, stocks may collapse, but dirt will feed you forever. And today, we witnessed my son marrying a woman who brings that dirt with her." The crowd burst into laughter. Some clapped, treating it like a clever joke. But I stood frozen, my smile stiff and unnatural. Every word felt like a blade, slicing through the fragile joy I'd built for this day. He wasn't just joking. He was reminding everyone that I was nothing more than a farm girl, unworthy of their polished, powerful family. My chest tightened, heat rose to my cheeks, but I forced myself to stay composed. I refused to let tears betray me in front of them all. Marcus squeezed my hand, grounding me. With a quick step forward, he lightened the moment. "Thank you, Dad, for the reminder. But I believe love is even more enduring than land. So tonight, let's drink to love." Laughter returned, glasses clinked. The celebration rolled on. But inside me, the wound was carved deep. I lifted my gaze and found Richard's eyes fixed on me, piercing, almost daring me to react. That look said it all. "You will always be the farmer's girl in my eyes." And in that moment, I realized this marriage was never going to be simple. As the laughter from Richard's remarks still lingered, the host invited me to say a few words. In that instant, it felt like every pair of eyes was waiting, watching what the farmer's girl would do. My heart pounded, my palms damp with sweat from the sting of his jab. But I told myself, if I stayed silent, they would always see me as less. I stepped forward and took the microphone. My voice trembled at first, but grew steadier with each sentence. I spoke about the place I came from, where families carry a tradition. Each generation keeps a glass jar filled with soil from their land. That jar is more than dirt. It holds the memory of those who worked it, the calloused hands of parents, the sweat soaked into every grain. And today, I had brought that jar with me to this wedding, as a reminder that I am not ashamed of my roots. I raised the small jar I had tucked away, the rich dark earth catching the warm glow of the lights. For a heartbeat, the entire place fell silent. Then I heard applause from the far end of the table. It was the farmers from my hometown, neighbors who had come to celebrate. They stood, clapping and cheering. Slowly, more guests joined in. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Richard's expression falter. His smirk faded, his brow creased in irritation. He hadn't expected me to respond this way, not with shouting or anger, but with calm pride, turning what he mocked into something that demanded respect. Marcus came to stand beside me, his hand on my shoulder. He leaned close and whispered, "You just earned their respect." I smiled, but inside, I knew this was only the beginning, because in Richard's cold stare, I saw it clearly. He wasn't going to let this go. 3 years after the wedding, I found myself once again seated with Marcus's family, this time in their luxurious lakeside estate. The house was massive, its lawn manicured to perfection, verandas overflowing with flowers, and white sailboats drifting silently in the distance. We gathered around a long, satin-covered table, crystal glasses sparkling in the midday sun. Everything carried the scent of privilege and wealth, worlds away from where I came from. Daniel, Marcus's older brother, stole the spotlight as usual. Dressed in polished suits, he boasted about his latest financial deals, a new condo he had purchased downtown, and the flashy sports car parked outside. Victoria, my mother-in-law, couldn't hide her pride. She looked at him with eyes full of admiration, praising him over and over. Daniel is truly the pride of this family. Richard nodded along, as if every one of Daniel's accomplishments was an extension of his own legacy. I sat quietly, sipping my wine, trying to blend in. And then, as always, came the inevitable jab. Someone chuckled and said, "And what about Elena? How's our little farm girl doing these days?" Laughter rippled across the table, not cruel in tone, but sharp enough to remind me of where they believed I stood. I forced a polite smile. Marcus, sitting beside me, shifted uncomfortably and touched my knee under the table, a silent gesture of comfort. Still, the sting remained. After 3 years, I was no closer to being seen as an equal. To them, I was, and perhaps would always be, the farm girl. I turned my gaze toward the lake, sunlight shimmering on the surface, and a thought pressed heavily in my chest. When would they finally stop belittling me and see me as part of this family for who I truly am? Later that evening, as the family moved from the dining table to the patio, conversations drifted toward careers and money. Daniel continued his performance, entertaining everyone with exaggerated stories of high-stakes deals and late-night strategy calls. He spoke with such certainty that, for a moment, even I almost believed him. But then Chloe, Marcus's youngest sister, spoke up. Chloe was different from the rest. Quiet, observant, someone who often slipped under the radar. With a casual sip of her drink, she said, almost offhandedly, "Funny, isn't it? People at Daniel's firm keep whispering about this thing called a performance improvement plan, I think. Usually means someone's job is hanging by a thread." The laughter around us stilled for a second. Victoria quickly forced a laugh, waving her hand. "Oh, Chloe, always with your wild little observations." Daniel's face tightened just slightly before he recovered, flashing his confident grin and changing the subject to a new investment he was considering. Most of the family played along, nodding, pretending the moment hadn't happened. But I saw it, that flicker in his expression, the way Richard's eyes darted toward him, then away, and Chloe's gaze, steady, sharp, like she had peeled back a layer no one else dared to touch. Something shifted inside me. For years, they had used Daniel as the shining contrast to my supposed insignificance. He was the golden son, the example they flaunted to remind me of what I wasn't. Yet here was a crack in that perfect facade, and it came not from me, but from within their own circle. I didn't say a word. I simply sat back, letting their laughter stumble back into place. But in my chest, a new awareness stirred. If Daniel's empire was beginning to wobble, then the pedestal they had put him on, and the one they used to keep me beneath them, might not be as steady as they believed. Chloe's birthday that year caught me off guard from the moment I walked in. Instead of the lavish parties I had grown used to, imported wine, fresh flowers everywhere, towering cakes, this one felt startlingly modest. Just a small room in their home, a few balloons, a medium-sized cake on the table, and only a handful of close guests. I was surprised at first, but then it sank in. Something in this family had shifted. Everyone still talked, still laughed, but the laughter felt forced, thinner than usual. Daniel was quieter, his expression tight, as though he was carrying a weight he couldn't set down. Chloe, of course, seemed carefree, blowing out her candles with a bright, genuine smile. But it was in this strained atmosphere that Victoria suddenly turned to me. "Elena," she said softly, her face drawn, "could you help us out? Just 20,000. Daniel is going through a rough patch, and the family needs to get through this period." For a moment, I froze. $20,000 was no small amount, But what startled me more was that Victoria, the woman who once brushed me off as nothing more than a farm girl, was now asking me for help. And in her eyes, just for a second, I caught something I had never seen before. Worry. Real, raw worry. I drew a slow breath and kept my tone gentle. I'm sorry, but we really have to save for the farm's expansion. We can't stretch any further. She hesitated, then quickly pulled on her polite smile, covering the disappointment that had flickered across her face. Of course, dear. I understand. But I knew better. In that instant, a new line had been drawn. I was no longer just the farm girl they mocked. I had become someone they needed, and the one who had refused them. Later that night, after most of the guests had left and the house grew quieter, I found Chloe standing on the porch, sipping from a glass of water. The cool air carried the faint scent of the lake, and for once, there was no noise, no performance. She looked at me with her usual sharp, knowing eyes and said almost casually, "You know what Mom asked you earlier? It's because things are worse than they let on." I frowned. Worse how? She leaned against the railing, her voice low. Daniel's not just having a rough patch. He's on a PEP, performance improvement plan. That's corporate speak for, if you don't turn it around in a few months, you're out. And from what I hear, he's not turning it around. The words hit me harder than I expected. For years, Daniel had been the golden standard in this family. The one they held up as proof of success, the one they used as contrast against me, and now, the cracks were undeniable. Chloe gave a dry laugh. That's the thing about this family. We live in what I call a halo culture. Everyone has to shine, no matter what, even if it means lying, borrowing, or pretending. Failure isn't allowed, so we cover it up. And if we can't cover it, we find someone else to make small, to distract from our own mess. She paused, her gaze steady on me. That's why they keep calling you the farm girl. It's easier to point at you than face what's really happening here. I didn't answer right away. A mix of bitterness and clarity churned inside me. For so long, I had carried their disdain like a burden, thinking it was because I didn't measure up. But in Chloe's words, I saw it differently. Their contempt wasn't just about me. It was about them, about the desperate need to maintain an illusion. As I looked at Chloe, I realized she was the only one in that house willing to strip the mask away. And for the first time, I began to wonder if she might become an unexpected ally. It happened one late evening, long after the lights in the house had dimmed, and the quiet hum of the farm was the only sound left. Marcus and I sat at the kitchen table, the same place where we planned bills and shared late-night cups of tea. But that night, his eyes carried a weight I hadn't seen before, as if he had been holding something back for far too long. "Elena," he began, his voice steady but low. "There's something I need to tell you, something I haven't told anyone else in my family." He paused, as if weighing whether to keep the truth hidden a little longer. "I earned my PhD at MIT, agricultural engineering. I specialized in sustainable systems." For a moment, I just stared at him, the words almost refusing to sink in. Marcus, my quiet, steady husband, the man his family dismissed as ordinary, had walked the halls of MIT, the very place the world associated with brilliance and innovation. He went on, his tone gathering strength. "While they've been chasing money and image, I've been building something real, AgriNova. I've spent years researching, modeling, and testing ways to fuse technology with farming, creating a system that doesn't just produce crops, but sustains the soil, the people, and the future." I watched him, my heart racing. The pieces began to fall into place. The late nights, the notebooks filled with diagrams, the way he spoke about farming as if it were more than survival, as if it were a revolution waiting to happen. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "I didn't want to tell my family. To them, everything is a competition. They would have twisted it, tried to own it. But with you, I want you to know. Because you've carried their judgment on your shoulders all this time. And I need you to see, we're not small, Elena. We're not weak." Tears stung my eyes. For years, I had borne the sting of being called a farm girl, the shadow of comparison with Daniel and the rest. But now, I saw the truth. The man sitting across from me wasn't less than them. He was already building something far greater. The next day, Marcus took me into his study, a room I had always thought of as his quiet retreat, cluttered with stacks of papers and binders. But now, he pulled open drawers and laid out folders with a precision that made me realize just how much he had been keeping under wraps. "These," he said, spreading a set of documents across the desk, "are patent applications, filed under my name and AgriNova's. Soil sensors, irrigation algorithms, nutrient monitoring systems, every piece designed to work together as part of a living network." I leaned closer, my fingers grazing the pages filled with diagrams and official seals. It was overwhelming. For years, I had thought our farm was just our small plot of land, but here in front of me was evidence that Marcus had been quietly building something with global implications. He continued, pulling another folder from the shelf. "And these are letters of intent. Universities, Berkeley, Purdue, even MIT itself, they've all expressed interest in partnering with us for research trials. Some are already running pilot projects with our prototypes." My breath caught. These weren't dreams scribbled in a notebook. These were tangible partnerships, institutions that believed in his vision. Marcus smiled faintly, the kind of smile that held both pride and humility. "The pipeline's already in motion. Greenhouse tests, open field trials, multi-crop rotations. Early data is strong. We're talking about higher yields with lower costs and healthier soil at the same time. It's not just theory anymore, Elena. It's working." I stood there, stunned, as the scope of it all settled over me. This wasn't just Marcus chasing an idealistic dream. He had created a foundation, step by step, with patents to protect it and universities backing it. Looking at him, I felt a surge of pride I couldn't contain. For years, his family had painted us as small, ordinary, provincial. But in that moment, I understood. What Marcus was building had the power to outlast their fortunes, their reputations, even their mockery. And for the first time, I felt the ground shifting, not beneath us, but under them. After the folders of patents and university letters, Marcus pulled out one final binder, thicker, heavier, its cover stamped with the seal of a federal agency. He placed it on the desk in front of me with a quiet sense of finality. "This," he said, flipping it open, "is our federal grant. $3.5 million, secured under a competitive program for agricultural innovation. But it's not free money. It comes with oversight, audits, and milestones we have to meet every quarter. It's proof not only of potential, but accountability." I traced the pages with my fingertips. Charts, timetables, official signatures. It was all so concrete. This wasn't just Marcus tinkering in the background. The government itself had invested in his vision. "And here," he continued, pulling another document from the folder, "is the independent valuation, commissioned by an outside firm. They valued AgriNova at $62 million. The number hit me like a shockwave. For years, his family had called me small, provincial, unworthy. And now, in black and white, was the truth. What Marcus had built quietly, without their knowledge, was worth more than all their boasts combined. Marcus's eyes softened as he watched me absorb it. "I didn't want you to think I was just dreaming, Elena. I wanted you to know the foundation is real. This is bigger than us, bigger than their scorn. It's a chance to change the way farming works in this country." Emotion swelled in my chest, pride mixing with disbelief. I remembered every dinner where I had been called the farm girl, every glance that placed me beneath them. Yet here, in these binders, lay proof that what we carried was not shame, but legacy. Not weakness, but strength. I met Marcus's gaze and whispered, "They don't know what they're underestimating." He gave a small, knowing smile. "They will, soon enough." The next evening, just as I was finishing up the books for the farm, my phone rang. Chloe's name flashed across the screen. Her voice, when I answered, was strained, almost panicked. "Elena, you need to know. Daniel's in deeper trouble than anyone's admitting. He didn't just lose a deal. He siphoned client funds. Money's missing. If the firm presses charges, it won't just be a job he loses. It could be prison. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Daniel, the golden son, the standard I'd been measured against for years, now revealed as a fraud. Chloe's breath hitched. They're meeting tonight. Mom and Dad are desperate. They want to find a way to clean this up before it explodes. And their solution, she hesitated, is AgriNova. My stomach turned cold. Later that night, I overheard it myself. In the family's hushed gathering at Richard and Victoria's house, their voices carried through the study door. Richard laid it out like a strategy session. We can't let Daniel fall. We'll pressure Marcus and Elena to sell AgriNova quickly. Take the cash, cover the gap, buy silence. If they resist, we'll remind them what family loyalty means. Victoria's voice cracked with desperation. If this becomes public, we're ruined. Daniel's future, our reputation, everything collapses. AgriNova is the only asset big enough to fix this. I stood frozen in the hallway, my fists clenched. The irony cut deep. After years of belittling us, of laughing at the soil under my nails, they were now plotting to take the very thing they had mocked. When I finally stepped back into the night air, my decision was clear. They weren't going to save Daniel. They were going to sacrifice us. And I knew then we had to be ready for the fight of our lives. The morning after Chloe's call, I barely had time to gather my thoughts before the sound of engines roared up our gravel drive. A line of dark cars pulled in, kicking up clouds of dust. I knew, even before I saw who stepped out, that this wasn't a visit, it was an ambush. Richard led the group, flanked by a sharp-suited attorney and a real estate broker clutching a thick black folder. Victoria followed close behind, her face taut with worry, while Daniel trailed in silence, his eyes shifting nervously as though every step weighed heavier than the last. They didn't ask to come inside. They walked straight into our farmhouse kitchen, filling the room with an air of authority and intrusion. Richard took his place at the table as if it were his own, motioning for the lawyer to open the folder. This, the lawyer announced smoothly, sliding a stack of documents toward us, is an independent valuation of AgriNova. Based on our analysis, the company is worth $1.2 million. We're prepared to offer a full buyout at that price. Cash. Clean. Immediate. The broker leaned in, rehearsed smile plastered on his face. It's a generous number for a young venture. Most would never see this kind of offer. My pulse pounded in my ears. 1.2 million. After everything Marcus had shown me, patents, partnerships, a $3.5 million federal grant, a valuation of $62 million. The figure on those pages was nothing less than an insult, a theft disguised as mercy. Richard folded his hands, his tone heavy with calculated gravity. Marcus, Elena, this is the only sensible choice. Take the deal. You walk away with money in hand, Daniel gets the support he needs, and the family avoids scandal. Everyone wins. But as his words settled over the table, I realized the truth. This wasn't about saving Daniel. This was about seizing AgriNova before the world could see what it was really worth. I looked at Marcus, and in his steady gaze I saw the same recognition. They hadn't come as family. They had come as predators. Marcus didn't reach for the papers. Instead, he sat back, his eyes fixed on Richard, then on the lawyer. His silence stretched long enough to make the broker shift uncomfortably. Finally, Marcus spoke, his tone calm, but razor sharp. 1.2 million. That's what you think this is worth? Did your analysis account for the $3.5 million federal grant already secured? Or the patents pending approval? Or the letters of intent from universities? No? Then what you've brought here isn't a valuation. It's a fabrication. The lawyer cleared his throat, trying to maintain composure. We relied on standard comparables, similar businesses in the region, revenue streams. Marcus leaned forward, his voice tightening. Those comparables are farms that went bankrupt or sold under distress. AgriNova isn't a distressed farm. It's a research-driven enterprise with proprietary technology. You cherry-picked data to force the number down. I slid the agreement closer, flipping to the clauses I had already skimmed. And this? I tapped the fine print. A non-compete for 10 years, covering any agricultural venture nationwide. You're not offering us freedom. You're muzzling us. You want to strip away the future, silence us, and then build on our work without us standing in your way. For a moment, the room went still. The lawyer avoided my eyes. The broker's smile faltered. Victoria shifted in her chair, pressing her lips together as if she wanted to protest, but couldn't. Richard's jaw clenched. This isn't about trickery. This is about family survival. If Daniel falls, we all fall. And if that happens, no one's name, yours included, will survive the stain. But I didn't flinch. I met his gaze squarely. You're asking us to give up everything we've built because Daniel gambled and lost. That's not survival. That's exploitation, and I won't be part of it. Marcus's hand brushed mine, steady, unwavering. Together, our refusal filled the room with a defiance they hadn't expected. And in Richard's eyes, for the first time, I saw a flicker. Not of power, but of frustration. The lawyer's argument sputtered out, but Richard was not finished. He leaned forward, his elbows heavy on the table, eyes narrowing like a judge preparing to deliver a verdict. His voice softened, but every word carried the weight of command. Marcus, Elena, this isn't about papers or clauses. This is about blood, about family. Daniel is your brother. If he goes down, it won't just be him. It will be all of us. Our name, our reputation, everything we've built. Are you really willing to see him humiliated, dragged through court, when you could stop it right here? Victoria's voice wavered as she joined in, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Elena, please. You've been part of this family for years now. We've welcomed you into our home, into our lives. All we ask is that you stand with us now. Sign the papers. Think of Daniel. Think of what this means for all of us. The words pressed against me like invisible hands, trying to bend me into submission. Marcus stayed quiet, his jaw tight, letting me answer. For once, I knew he wanted my voice to carry the truth. I drew in a slow breath, forcing calm into my chest, and then spoke. You say this is about family, but what you're asking isn't unity, it's erasure. You want us to give up the work Marcus has dedicated his life to, the future we've built, so Daniel doesn't have to face the consequences of his choices. That's not family loyalty. That's sacrifice, without dignity. Victoria's eyes shimmered, but she said nothing. Daniel stared at the table, unable to meet my gaze. Richard's face hardened, veins visible at his temple. I pushed the contract back across the table. I will not sign, not today, not ever. The silence that followed was thick and electric, every unspoken word rattling between us. For the first time, I felt not like their target, but their equal, unmoved, unbroken. Marcus reached for my hand, and together, our refusal hung in the air like a final judgment. Richard's hand slammed down on the table, the sharp crack echoing through the farmhouse kitchen. His composure finally cracked, and his voice turned cold, stripped of its polished charm. You think you can stand against us? Fine, but don't fool yourself, Elena. This isn't over. You may have won tonight, but we will come back, with resources, with leverage, with help you can't imagine. And when we do, you'll wish you had taken this deal. Victoria rose quickly, her face pale but tight with anger. She avoided my eyes as she smoothed her coat, muttering something about disappointment and loyalty. Daniel trailed after them, silent, his shoulders hunched as though the weight of his own mistakes had finally begun to press down. The lawyer and broker gathered their folders, their earlier confidence gone, leaving only the faint stink of intimidation behind. When the door closed and the sound of their cars faded down the drive, the silence left behind felt heavier than their presence. For a long moment, Marcus and I sat without speaking, listening to the creak of the old house settle back into itself. Finally, I stood. My hands were steady, though my heart pounded like a drum. We need to prepare. Tonight. Marcus nodded. Together, we pulled out every folder, every binder of documentation, patents, grants, valuations. I called our attorney, voice firm as I explained the situation. He promised to begin drafting protections immediately. Marcus locked our digital files behind new passwords, encrypting records so nothing could be tampered with. I sealed the original grant paperwork in a fireproof safe. The kitchen table, once a battlefield of papers shoved in our faces, became our war room, and for the first time, I felt the shift. They weren't the only ones with power. We had truth, proof, and resolve. I knew they would come back. Richard had promised as much. But when they did, they would not find us unprepared. Because this time, we weren't just defending a farm, we were defending a future. And I was ready for the storm. They didn't wait long to strike back. Within a week, word spread that a family meeting had been called at the community hall. Marcus and I walked in hand, only to realize it was no meeting. It was an ambush disguised as an intervention. Rows of neighbors filled the chairs, their faces curious, uncertain. At the front sat Richard and Victoria, flanked by Daniel with his forced bravado. To one side stood Pastor Harris, the town's respected minister, and Dr. Myers, a local psychologist. The sight of them made my stomach twist. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. They had turned it into a public trial. Richard rose first, his voice carrying the practiced authority of a man used to being obeyed. We're here because we love Marcus and Elena, but love also means truth. Elena has been clinging to illusions, believing her farm and this so-called venture are worth fortunes. She refuses to help her husband's brother, refuses to stand with family. And in doing so, she endangers not only us, but this entire community's reputation. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Pastor Harris cleared his throat, his tone measured but pointed. Sometimes ambition blinds us. Sometimes we confuse pride with purpose. Then Dr. Myers added, It's not uncommon for individuals under stress to develop grandiose beliefs about projects or finances. Intervention can be painful, but necessary. Their words pressed down on me, each one a stone laid on my chest. Around us, neighbors shifted uncomfortably, glancing at me with doubt, some even with pity. I could feel the weight of their judgment, the sting of being painted as delusional, selfish, unfit to see reality. I tried to steady my breathing, to hold Marcus's hand tighter, but inside, a fire burned. They had taken their disdain and turned it into spectacle. This wasn't intervention. This was humiliation. I looked out at the crowd, at faces I had worked beside in fields, at people who had eaten at our table, and for the first time, I wondered, would they believe me when the truth finally came to light? Or had Richard's shadow already swallowed their faith whole? Marcus rose slowly, the scrape of his chair against the floor cutting through the murmurs. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm presence drew every eye in the room. He held a thick binder in his hands, the same one he had shown me in the quiet of our study. I've heard enough, he said evenly. You speak of illusions, but what Elena and I have built isn't fantasy. It's fact. And tonight, you'll see it for yourselves. He opened the binder and held up the first document, his voice steady. Here is the independent valuation, conducted by a national firm. $62 million, not 1.2. 62. Gasps spread across the hall. Richard shifted in his chair, his jaw tightening. Marcus turned the page. Here is the federal grant. $3.5 million awarded after months of rigorous review. Every quarter, auditors from Washington track our progress. That is not a delusion. It's accountability. He laid out copies of patent filings stamped with official seals. Soil sensors, irrigation algorithms, crop modeling systems, all intellectual property protected under law. Finally, he held up letters with university letterheads. Berkeley, Purdue, MIT, institutions that don't gamble on fantasies. They've signed agreements to test and develop our systems. Partnerships already underway. The silence in the room deepened, heavy and electric. Neighbors leaned forward, eyes wide. Pastor Harris's brows knit together. doubt creeping into his features. Dr. Myers shifted uncomfortably, his earlier confidence dissolving. I looked around and saw the change ripple outward. Where moments ago there had been pity and suspicion, now there was awe. The truth had cracked open the shell of Richard's narrative, and light was pouring through. Marcus closed the binder and rested his hands on it. We have nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to hide. The shame here is not ours. For the first time since stepping into that hall, I felt the weight on my chest begin to lift. The tide was turning. Before Richard could gather himself to respond, Chloe stood up from the second row. She had been quiet all evening, her arms folded, her expression unreadable. Now she reached into her bag and pulled out a small recorder. "You all deserve to hear something," she said, her voice clear, carrying across the hall. She pressed play. Richard's voice filled the room, harsh and unmistakable. "We can't let Daniel fall. We'll pressure Marcus and Elena to sell AgriNova quickly. Take the cash, cover the gap, buy silence. If they resist, we'll remind them what family loyalty means." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Then came Victoria's voice, strained, desperate. "If this becomes public, we're ruined. AgriNova is the only asset big enough to fix this." The recording ended with silence, and Chloe let it hang in the air like a blade. She turned toward her parents, her voice sharp. "You painted Elena as delusional, but tell me, who here is lying? Who here is exploiting family for their own gain?" Gasps rippled across the hall. Pastor Harris, visibly shaken, shifted in his seat. "If this is true," his voice faltered, then steadied, "then we've been misled. And I cannot, in good faith, stand by the accusations I made tonight." Dr. Myers cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "Nor can I. My professional opinion was given under false pretenses. I withdraw it immediately." Richard's face turned crimson, his fists clenched at his sides. Victoria looked down at her lap, unable to meet the eyes of the community. Daniel sat frozen, his mask of confidence shattered, his shame plain for all to see. The room shifted around us. Neighbors who had looked at me with pity now stared at Richard with outrage. The whispers grew louder, the current of opinion surging away from him, toward us. I glanced at Chloe, who gave the faintest nod. For the first time, she had chosen a side, and it wasn't theirs. And in that moment, I knew. Their fortress of power had cracked wide open. The hall was silent now, thick with the weight of truth. All eyes turned toward me as if waiting to see what I would do next. For years, I had been the quiet one, enduring their barbs, swallowing humiliation to keep the peace. But not tonight. I rose slowly, feeling Marcus's steady presence beside me. My voice carried, not because it was loud, but because it came from a place I had guarded for too long. "You've called me delusional. You've mocked me as the farm girl. You've tried to erase the work Marcus and I have built, and now, when Daniel's lies threaten to burn everything down, you come to us for rescue." I paused, scanning the faces before me, neighbors, elders, friends who had known me since childhood. But hear me clearly. I will not save Daniel. I will not sign away AgriNova. Every man and woman must answer for their own choices, and his choices are not mine to carry. A ripple of murmurs swept the room, but I didn't waver. I lifted my chin, my voice ringing with finality. There is one thing I will protect, our dignity, because dignity is not negotiable. Dignity is knowing when to draw a line and say, enough. To keep your hands clean even when others demand you soil them. To know your limits and honor them. The words settled like a verdict. For a moment, the community was still. Then, slowly, applause broke out. It started with a handful of farmers in the back row, men and women who knew the weight of soil in their palms. Then more joined until the hall thundered with clapping and shouts of support. Richard and Victoria sat frozen, their power stripped away under the glare of truth. Daniel bowed his head, unable to meet anyone's eyes. And Chloe, standing off to the side, gave me a small, resolute nod. For the first time, I wasn't just defending myself. I was standing as proof that even in the face of pressure, betrayal, and lies, you could choose honor over compromise. And in that hall, I felt it shift. The community was no longer theirs. It was ours. The news came on a bright morning, the kind where the fields shimmered with dew and the air smelled like promise. We gathered outside the new greenhouse frame, neighbors and friends huddled close, when a black government sedan pulled into the drive. Out stepped Karen Lee, a representative from the USDA, carrying a folder pressed neatly under her arm. She shook Marcus's hand firmly, then turned to me. On behalf of the United States Department of Agriculture, I'm proud to formally award AgriNova the federal grant of $3.5 million. Her words rang out clear, and for a heartbeat, time seemed to stop. Applause broke out around us, first cautious, then swelling, a chorus of cheers and clapping that echoed across the farm. The very people who once whispered doubts in the hall now stood beaming, their pride as tangible as the morning sun. Farmers clapped Marcus on the back. Women hugged me tight. Children darted between us, shouting, "Congratulations!" I looked at Marcus, and in his eyes I saw the reflection of every late night, every battle fought, every moment we nearly broke. And now here we stood, not just surviving, but rising. From the crowd, Chloe stepped forward. She wore no hesitation this time, only resolve. "If you'll have me," she said, her voice steady, "I want to work at AgriNova. I'm done standing on the sidelines. This is where I belong." I felt my chest tighten with emotion. This was the same Chloe who had once sat quietly, watching the fractures of her family. Now she was stepping into the light, choosing to build instead of tear down. I took her hand, squeezing it with gratitude. "Welcome home," I said. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a victory for Marcus and me. It was the beginning of something larger, an awakening for everyone around us, proof that dignity and perseverance could create something worth believing in. 6 months later, the farm no longer looked like the modest place where Marcus and I had once struggled to keep up with bills. 3 vast greenhouses stretched across the land, their glass panes glinting in the morning light. Beside them stood a newly built research center, our AgriNova hub, buzzing with students, scientists, and farmers walking side by side, notebooks in hand, exchanging ideas as though we'd built not just a company, but a community of innovators. That autumn, I stood on stage at the Rural Innovation Awards, the lights hot on my face as they announced my name. The applause felt unreal, a wave of recognition I never thought would reach me. The farm girl they once laughed at, now honored for leading a vision that stretched far beyond our fields. Back home, a letter arrived from Victoria. Her handwriting was shaky, but the words carried a quiet surrender. She was leaving Chicago, retreating to a smaller life, admitting that pride had cost her more than she ever realized. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She only wrote, "Take care of Marcus. You were right to stand your ground." I folded the letter carefully, not with bitterness, but with a strange, tender closure. We launched our mentorship program that winter. Young women from rural towns coming to AgriNova to learn, to grow, to see themselves as leaders. Every time I walked through the research center and saw their eager faces, I felt something settle in my chest. This was bigger than revenge, bigger than proving Richard wrong. This was planting seeds for a future they couldn't erase. At the entrance of the building, in a glass case, we placed the soil jar. The same jar I had held on my wedding day, mocked and dismissed. Now it stood as a symbol, not of shame, but of triumph. A reminder that dignity, like soil, holds life within it, if only you dare to believe. And as I touched the glass, watching the morning sun strike through the earth inside, I knew our harvest had only just begun.